Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with John Wheeler. John is a senior advisor for risk and technology for AuditBoard and the founder and CEO of Wheelhouse Advisors, a global risk management strategy and technology advisory firm. He is a recognized expert and author on the effective use of risk management practices and technology in large and mid-sized businesses. And he is also a former senior director at Gartner, which is a global risk management technology leader. So, John, thank you for joining us for our Risk Management Show podcast interview today.
My pleasure. I'm great to be here.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure too. So, before we start our topic, can you please tell us a short story about your career path, what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys at AuditBoard and your other company, advisory board, or Wheelhouse Advisors are up to these days?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And it's been a long career for me, so I'll try to keep it short. I've got over 33 years of experience, and I like to break my career up into thirds. And the first third of my career, I spent focused in the healthcare industry, actually served as an IT consultant for a couple of the global professional services firms, and then went to work for a client as corporate controller and head of finance it's a large academic healthcare system. And while there, that's where I started to gain my real appreciation for risk management and control. In my second third of the career, I decided to leave healthcare, and I made a move over to financial services and served as senior executive leading areas like internal audit, compliance, and risk management for a very large financial services institution. And this time was the early 2000s when I started. And so I had the experience of actually helping my company dig out of what we in the industry call a material weakness. And unfortunately, it had the dubious distinction of being the very first company to disclose a material weakness under Sarbanes-Oxley. And so I broke new ground with that. I was not in charge of the program at the time. I was head of internal audit, and we uncovered the material weakness. And once that was found, the board of directors asked me to step out of my internal audit role and take over the compliance program. And so I rebuilt it with a focus towards integrating Sarbanes-Oxley into the larger operational and enterprise risk management discipline at the bank. And so put in a whole new infrastructure around risk management for the bank, and learned a lot for sure. And just before we ran into the global financial crisis, I had one of those career moments where in my role as a senior risk management executive overseeing all the business units, I found some major weaknesses and controls around our mortgage business. And we had a shift in our CEO. The prior CEO that I worked for my majority of time at the bank retired. A new CEO was much more aggressive and decided to remove some controls in the mortgage business to try to keep up with others in the industry. Without going into a lot of detail, I will tell you, I had to inform them that we needed to implement stronger controls. We had a disagreement. I ended up leaving the bank, actually cashed out, and just in time for the financial crisis to hit. And by no means did I call the financial crisis, but I saw the risk on the horizon. So at that time is when I founded Wheelhouse Advisors. Spent about 3.5, 4 years in an advisory capacity to companies in all industries, putting together enterprise risk management programs. Gartner saw me on the speaker circuit, asked me to join them and reinvigorate their coverage of GRC technologies. So the last decade I spent with Gartner doing just that. And my research led me to defining the marketplace for integrated risk management, which is an evolution beyond GRC, and did a lot of work there in terms of market sizing and forecasting, and really targeting the top and upcoming technology providers in the space. I decided to leave Gartner. I targeted a number of technology providers that I saw as true visionaries, and AuditBoard was one of those. So I've been with AuditBoard for about a year and a half now as a senior advisor, and helping them to grow their product beyond what was their original focus around Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, as it turns out, ironically, and evolve it into other areas such as operational risk management, IT risk management, certainly compliance, helping organizations meet their compliance objectives in a very effective and efficient way. And we're doing great things. The company is growing tremendously, over 60% per year, serving the top Fortune 500 companies as well as mid-sized companies. So I'm really happy to be with AuditBoard and think they have a great product.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I think we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of complying with the latest IT and cybersecurity regulations, with the main goal to create stronger cybersecurity practices and include some understanding and asset organization level of compliance. So, John, can you tell us what are some of the most important IT and cybersecurity regulations that businesses need to be aware of today?
Wonderful question, and very timely. In fact, over the last week or two, I've been giving talks to a number of different groups around, what they need to be focused on in 2023 as it relates to cybersecurity. And for me, what beyond all the regulations that are currently in place, what's coming to the fore this year is super important, and I think it's going to change how companies apply resources, and also better disclosure and understanding of their cybersecurity risk posture. And that is first and foremost, here in the US, the Security and Exchange Commission, their proposed rules around cybersecurity disclosure, which had been out for comment for almost a year now. They issued them last year. They're targeted to finalize them next month in April, and so they'll become effective. And what it means for organizations, and these are public companies, but it's also going to have a trickle-down effect to private companies, which I'll get to in a moment, is that they have to, first off, be in a position where they can disclose any material cybersecurity event or incident in a very quick fashion. They have to disclose that through an 8K filing to the SEC in 4 business days, as it was proposed. That may change in the final rules, but I predict it will be a short time frame. If it's not 4 business days, maybe a little bit longer. But what that means for organizations is that they have to have a very fine-tuned risk management program that incorporates all elements, whether it's security for sure, but also other areas like third-party risk management, because third parties in the IT and the cyberspace represent a big, if not majority of the risk in most cases, because a lot of companies are looking to third parties to provide technology or skill sets they simply don't have. And so that to do that, they need an integrated risk approach to bring all that data to bear in a very quick way. And then beyond that is quantifying the risk, which is something that a lot of organizations still have not fully embraced, especially as it relates to cybersecurity. They're still living in the world of the traditional heat map, which is more qualitative or subjective in nature. So now they need to move beyond just the subjective view of risk and quantify exactly what that impact from a given cybersecurity event is to determine whether it needs to be disclosed. And then secondly, beyond just disclosing those incidents, they need to focus on disclosing how they are managing the risk associated with cybersecurity in their annual 10K filing. In that 10K filing, the annual report, they'll have to provide details like the policies and procedures related to third-party risk management, but also how they are organized, whether they have a chief information security officer, what the reporting relationships are, and then also detail how the board of directors is involved in the cybersecurity program and what sort of expertise they have at the board level. So this is going to be a major event.
Mm-hmm. So, and if we go dive deeper a little bit, how does this all the regulation impact businesses in different industries, and what are some of the common challenges that companies face when they have to comply with them?
Yeah, great question there too. And I'll kind of move on to what I mentioned earlier about the trickle down effect from this SEC rule set, and that trickle down effect I think is going to impact all sorts of industries, meaning that these third parties or vendors or partners of public companies that have to comply with these filings, they're going to be asked for a lot of different information from these public companies to allow them to better quantify the amount of the risk event or incident that they have experienced. In many cases, a lot of these incidents may actually evolve from that third party itself. And so they're going to have to provide a lot more information around their involvement in that incident or event, and be prepared to do that in a quick way. In my talks that I mentioned over the course of the last couple of weeks, there's a slide that I have and it draws some survey information from a recent survey done by KPMG. And the question is, how many companies have experienced a major third-party cybersecurity event leading to significant monetary loss or reputational damage? And in that survey, 38% of the companies responded that they have experienced more than 3 incidents of that large nature over the last 3 years, 38%. And then when you break it down across the industries, which gets, I think, to your question exactly, no industry is left untouched. In fact, you have automotive leading the way with 57% in that category of experiencing more than 3 incidents. And then you've got the likes of healthcare, pharmaceuticals, as well as energy and utilities, right about 37%, right neck and neck. And then other industries like financial services or manufacturing, retail, more along the lines of 30%. So roughly a third in those industries. So no one, there's no place to hide, I guess I would say here. And the regulations coming to the fore, requesting a lot more disclosure, are going to be very impactful.
Interesting. So if we go to the response that businesses have to provide, what are some of the best practices that they have to follow and to ensure that they are compliant with regulation in protecting their data and systems?
Yeah, I think in terms of best practices, what we see is, again, a need to integrate cybersecurity into the larger risk management discipline. And to do that, companies need to take what they may have, and depending on their maturity, in the form of a risk assessment around the technology assets. And what in the asset realm, it could be data, it could be hardware, software, understanding the risk that's inherent in those technology assets, and then be able to connect those into the broader business process. What assets are enabling a given business process and how critical that business process may be to the organization. A big piece of the disclosure and the risk management view that the SEC is looking for, I failed to mention, is business continuity. And so as part of the business continuity plans, companies need to have a really good focus on what is critical to the business. And if they experience an event that causes a significant operational disruption, be able to pinpoint those processes and more importantly, the technology assets enabling those processes to successfully recover them in a timely fashion. And so having that connection and understanding is vital. What I saw during the pandemic and advising companies in my time at Gartner, because a good portion of my time at Gartner, I was leading into the pandemic and early stages of the pandemic. I found that companies, as they went through the early shutdowns and restarts associated with the pandemic, they looked to their business continuity plans and found in many cases, not only were they out of date, meaning that they didn't have the full set of critical business processes that have evolved over time, they didn't go far enough in that they focused purely on those processes internal to the organization and didn't look to see how they impacted or the process extended to third parties in the broader ecosystem. And so as they went through the whole restart process, restoration process, they lacked visibility into that ecosystem. And so it had all sorts of problems getting things back online. So those companies certainly have updated those plans. They need to keep them fresh. And then the last connection that I wanted to emphasize is not only having the assets and the processes connected, but then having those two pieces connected into the strategic view of the organization or set of objectives. And why this is so important is, and it goes to the board level disclosure that the SEC is going to be looking for, is that those strategic objectives really lay out the future of the organization, where the organization is headed, what sort of changes are going to be made, and also critically, what is the overall risk appetite at the board level. And so the risk appetite being that willingness to take on risk in the achievement of a given strategic objective. And if that risk appetite gets out of sync with the risk that is being taken at the lower levels within the organization, you can have major problems. I alluded to the career example I had at financial institution, and that is what happened exactly. The risk appetite at the board level was, more conservative. They didn't know that a lot of the risks that were being taken within the mortgage business unit were being taken, and the controls were not surfacing those issues. And so when that happens, major problems arise. So having all three connected, technology assets, business process, strategic objectives, that's the way forward.
Interesting. So let's discuss now what are the consequences of failing to comply with this regulations, and how, maybe if you have some example. Of course, you already given one of your example from your previous employment, and how can businesses mitigate this risk?
Yeah, I think a lot of press focuses on maybe the fines associated with a given compliance mandate, and while the fines can be impactful on their own, I think where the larger monetary impacts come from are beyond the fines themselves. So when you look at certainly the hits to reputation and what will happen to the business and their ability to continue as a going concern is huge, and with the SEC rules kind of continuing on this theme, if there's a major issue, there's going to be a hit from an investor perspective. And, I mentioned in my career background, we had the material weakness. And we're the very first company to disclose that. When that was disclosed, we had a significant hit to our stock price. And so the valuation of the company is at risk. Then you also consider, any legal risk that you may encounter. So a lot of these events will spur, plaintiffs' attorneys to look for investor lawsuits associated with the loss of that market capitalization. And, it just continues to grow exponentially as these things pile up. And so organizations need to be very cognizant of the potential for follow-on risks from this single incident. It's not just that single incident that's going to be the costly item, I think.
Mhm. All right. So I would like to ask you a personal opinion. What is the commonly held belief in your space of audit and regulation that you kind of strongly disagree with? Just to know your personal opinion.
And can you give me maybe an example of what you're looking for, or just to make sure I answer it?
Well, for example, if you have maybe some misconception, in the industry that you kind of maybe disagree with. If no, there is no much big deal. Just I want to hear. Sometimes there is kind of mainstream misconception that some thought leaders disagree with.
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know if this hits the mark entirely, and actually, I'm going to put a positive spin on your question. In my view, especially in the U.S., the government gets a bad rap, and while I don't see the government as a perfect institution by any means, and there are certainly areas of overreach. One of the areas that I am really impressed with, and I think the government does a great job, is in the area of IT and IT frameworks. And so what I'm referring to specifically is the NIST framework, cybersecurity framework that has been put together. And in my view, has almost become the de facto standard in cybersecurity because of its very practical nature and easy to understand implementation. So that NIST framework is being used by not only organizations based in the US, but globally. It also ties into a couple of other key frameworks. They have attached to the NIST cybersecurity framework a risk management framework that is very similar in design and approach to the integrated risk management view that I just gave. And so the government, as it relates to IT and cybersecurity, is much more mature than folks might give them credit for. And, if I were in a company today looking to rapidly mature my cybersecurity practices and program, I would go first to NIST and that cybersecurity framework, as well as there are other related publications, as my starting point.
All right, fantastic. So as we kind of just summarize our interview, if someone who is listening to this interview would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would that be?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I think it is, you got to start now. If you haven't started preparing for the cybersecurity regulations around what the SEC is asking, whether you're a public company or not, you need to start now because, again, these rules are going to be finalized next month, and the filings will be expected, on an immediate basis through the 8Ks this year, and then certainly for annual reporting that will go into 2024 for the full-on disclosure. So it's not just focusing on the disclosure requirements itself, it's having the infrastructure in place to support it. And so in putting together that infrastructure, you need to have that integrated risk approach that I described. And so to do that, not only do you need to involve a lot of key stakeholders within your organization, but look outside of your organization to your third parties, but also to stakeholders like your regulator, your external auditors, your investors, your customers, but also the employees within your organization, and giving them the ability to collaborate and better understand the risk that they face, but also are a participant in mitigating. And to do that, you'll need technology to enable your program. And so technology like AuditBoard's connected risk platform can be a great help. But even before you get to that step to implement technology, it's important that you have all the key processes and the frameworks in place, and then select the right technology for your needs.
Fantastic. That's all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you some important question that you would like to share with our audience, please go ahead.
Actually, I think you did a great job with your questions. I really don't have any additional items to discuss, but thank you again for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure as well. So I hope we will kind of continue our cooperation with your company and yourself, because we have a large audience, and they all are keen to hear your opinion. Thank you very much again.
My pleasure.